We begin in Iran, where huge crowds are out in the streets to pay their respects to slain military leader Qasem Soleimani. He is being laid to rest in his hometown 4 days after he was killed by a US drone strike in neighboring Iraq. His death has prompted vows of retaliation from Iran and its allies. The US says he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American troops and was planning more attacks. In the Iranian capital, Tehran, the streets were packed with mourners for as far as the eye could see. CNN cannot verify the number, but Iranian state TV reports it was in the millions. Pallbearers carried Soleimani's casket for nearly 10 kilometres or 6 miles. Many in the crowd held up pictures of Soleimani. Others chanted "Death to America" and called for revenge against US President Donald Trump. CNN's Fred Pleitgen was at that procession in Tehran, and we will have his report coming up very soon. We'll also hear from our correspondents covering all the angles from across the region, and we will have expert analysis from our guests. So let's begin with CNN's international diplomatic editor, Nick Robertson, joining us this hour from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So, Nick, as Iran mourns the death of Qasem Soleimani, the rest of the world is on edge, concerned about the potential consequences of an Iranian retaliation, and then, of course, a counterattack from the US. How might Iran retaliate?
Well, I think the perception at the moment is that Qasem Soleimani is turning into the ultimate martyr, really, for his cause and for the cause of Iran, and that is to remove US interests as much as possible from the region. That's what's been heard from the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in Lebanon, and that's the message that's been coming from senior Iranian officials, that there will be a military retaliation. This does seem to be perhaps the best strategic use that the Iranians can put to the killing of Qasem Soleimani, beyond, of course, a very clear demonstration of the support for him and, by implication, the support for the regime in Tehran and the leadership of the Ayatollahs there. So the knock-on effect to the region, if you will, is sort of being judged in that light. You know, Saudi Arabia yesterday sent its sort of third most powerful person, the brother to the Crown Prince, Khalid bin Salman, went and met with the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the US Secretary of Defense Esper. And the conversation there, we've been told, was to talk about de-escalation and making sure there isn't a rise in tensions in the region, and try to put it to the United States that any increases the possibility of conflict in the region, and that's bad for everyone. But the perception at the moment here is that those countries like Saudi Arabia in the region that want the situation to calm down are best off being quiet and watching and judging what Iran does. And at the moment, their judgment it certainly seems to be to understand that it is the Americans themselves, rather than their allies in the region, that are going to be put in the crosshairs, and the effort of Iran will be to isolate the United States as best it can, and as much as it can reduce its military presence in the region.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that isolation, because has that increased for the United States in the wake of this targeted killing of Soleimani? Because we saw the joint statement from the United Kingdom, France and Germany, and there was a sense that the United States is on its own if it takes this path.
It highlights the divisions that already existed. There's no doubt about that. If you look at the response that the Europeans have had, not just to where they see the situation right now, but their response to the Iranians over Iran's announcement about another step to not comply with the multinational nuclear deal. The sense is that as long as Iran continues to allow weapons inspectors, or rather inspectors, International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors, into the country, then the deal is not dead. said. So this puts a bigger rift between the Europeans and the United States. If we look at NATO's position, which is to affirm that it is committed to training Iraqi forces, i.e. a presence in Iraq. If we listen to what the Canadians are saying about their commitment to leading that NATO presence in Iraq for training Iraqi forces, the gaps with the United States grow. As President Trump tweets about targeting cultural sites, about putting sanctions on Iraq, about demanding reparations for money invested in military bases in Iraq, none of this is comfortable listening for the United States allies in this region, because it makes it a harder sell to partner with the United States. It's not going to cause a break in those relationships, but the hope here in the region would be that there would be a recalibration by the United States and President Trump over these comments. But at the moment, in essence, Iran has a massive card to play here. The popularity of Soleimani, the numbers of people on the streets, and the feeling that the United States has overstretched and overplayed its hand in killing Soleimani can be used against the United States. I don't think we're going to see permanent breaks and changes in relationships with the United States, but it just makes some allies in the region here want to remain quiet rather than stand on the table, if you will, and show strong support for the United States, because what President Trump is saying at the moment is not something that they can get behind.
And for more perspective on all of this, Fawaz Georges joins us now from Kuwait City. He is a professor of Middle Eastern politics and international relations at the London School of Economics and the author of Making the Arab World. Always good to get your perspective on these matters. So, Iran has vowed to retaliate in the wake of this targeted killing of Qasem Soleimani. But President Trump is threatening to strike back against 52 Iranian targets, including cultural sites, if they do retaliate, although his defense secretary has said that won't happen. But what if Hezbollah do it for them? Would that give Iran plausible deniability? Where do you see this all going?
Well, I think the situation is highly volatile, highly dangerous. Even though we do not know what's going to happen, what might happen, there's a great deal of volatility, a great deal of uncertainty. One thing is for sure, Iran is obviously determined to attack American interests directly, and I stress directly. It seems to me a decision has been made in Tehran that Tehran, as opposed to its own proxy forces in Iraq or Lebanon or Yemen, will basically retaliate against American forces. And to answer your question, I think both powers, the United States and Iran now, are locked into a cycle of escalation and counter-escalation, which really means at the end of the day, you might have war, even by miscalculation, even though neither side wants war with each other.
And that is the fear, of course. The US says that Soleimani was targeted because he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of American troops and was planning imminent attacks. We're yet to see any intel on that. Does that give the US sufficient justification for a killing like this?
No. I think the assassination of Soleimani was neither legal nor ethical. And as importantly, it was very much misguided strategically. You're absolutely correct. General Soleimani supported and provided a great deal of technical and military support to the Iraqis who were basically attacking American forces in Iraq between 2004 and 2007. My question, Rosemary, is the following. What were American forces doing in Iraq in the first place? Did they have a legal justification to invade Iraq? Did the Iraqi government invite the American forces to come to Iraq? Were the American forces an invading force or a friendly force? If the American presence in Iraq was illegal, and if President George W. Bush invaded the country unilaterally, does this mean justification for the killing of President George Bush, assassinating President Bush, as he was responsible about the killing of tens of thousands of Iraqis, if not hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. It doesn't make sense. You don't have to look at it from what the Trump administration says. You have to look at it from multiple angles. I'm not defending Soleimani. And the fact is, Rosemary, Soleimani was in the same trenches with the Americans in the fight against ISIS between 2014 and 2017-18. So even though Soleimani was an enemy of the United States, strategically it does not make sense, because now we're seeing unintended consequences that might come to haunt American foreign policies for years to come.